and others entities. So this is the lamp and the illuminating lamp example. So I mentioned it comes up in Shantideva, chapter 9, when they're talking about, can the mind know itself, and we're talking about these self-cognizers. So that's all kind of criticism, sort of advancing criticism. The lamp illuminating itself and other entities is like, that's the Chittamatra view with the self-cognizers. For instance, Chittamatra view, so the mind knows itself and the object out there as well. So anyway, don't worry about that. But Jimpa found another use of this this example of the lamp in its light in another text by Nagarjuna. So its text is called what? Examination or refutation of logic, is it?
Yes, refutation of Nyaya.
So his there's another text there, and that again is talking about mind, actually. So how do you know you're looking at blue? Well, you've got an eye conscious realizing blue, haven't you? So how do you know that eye conscious realizing blue? How do you realize it's? How do you know it's a non-mistaken consciousness realizing blue? So don't need another consciousness to recognize that the eye conscious seeing blue is a valid consciousness. Only if you know that the eye conscious seeing blue is a valid consciousness, then only can you establish that it's blue out there. So blue, depends on for its existence on being known by a valid cognizer. But what does that valid cognizer know in blue? What does it depend on to make sure it's valid? What's checking up to see that it's valid and not just a mistaken or wrong consciousness? No, well then you need another consciousness, So the opponent says, no, you don't, because the consciousness knows itself and it knows the object at the same time, you see. Just like a lamp illuminates itself and others entities, you see. So it's, but of course Nagarjuna thinks that's a ridiculous idea, and he's does his best to refute it, just like here. So, so the argument shifts from arising to the example, the lamp. Can a lamp illuminate itself? Can a lamp illuminate other entities? So, and Buddhapalita tells us, at the top of page 10, a lamp does not illuminate itself or its own or others' entities. So it not only doesn't illuminate itself, it doesn't illuminate other things, like pot or cloth, whatever's on the table with a lamp. It doesn't illuminate those either. So this is why we start to get, start to worry that this is going to be a difficult section. But why doesn't it illuminate itself and other things as well? Well, in 9ab it says, there is no darkness in a lamp, nor in the place where it is set. Because their definition of illumination is clearing away of darkness. So if there's no darkness to be cleared away, then there's no illumination going on. Illumination is clearing dark, he said, isn't it? So if you remember that. So that makes you think, is that what really the meaning of illumination is? It's clearing away of darkness. Illuminating, well, it does it, lifting away the darkness. But it makes you think, the first moment of the light in the room, like this room, when you switch the light on. Okay, so that's when that comes on, the light goes, the darkness goes away. But the second moment of the light in this room, that's not illuminating then, because there's no dark for it to clear away. So the second moment or the third moment of the light in this room, that's not illuminating anything. It's illuminating the room, but if the room's not dark, it doesn't need illuminating. What? I don't know. Oh. Well, that's what he seems to say, like illumination clearing dark. So if there's an absence of darkness, then there's no need for illumination. They don't need illuminating; they're already illuminated or something. So then, how does this lamp illuminate then? And then the opponent says, in 9d, well, illumination is clearing away dark. When it says, okay, by the time the lamp is there, the full flame, the full lamp, okay, then the illumination is complete. There's so it doesn't need illuminating. So even the opponent's agreeing with that. So the opponent is saying it's the arising lamp that is illuminating. It's the arising lamp that does the illuminating. So that's a commentary under 9D. So even the opponent's got this way of saying, well, maybe it isn't the lamp that's illuminating, it's the arising lamp that's illuminating. That's the one that's actually clearing away the darkness. So what does it mean by arising lamp? Well, it doesn't tell you, but I've had to think about that. So I'll have a go at answering that question. But even that is not acceptable for Buddhapalita or Nagarjuna in verse number 10. How is the darkness cleared away by means of an arising lamp when an arising lamp does not make contact with the dark at all? So that's very, sort of a very kind of, what should we say, stark or kind of, very sort of clear refutation or refusal to accept that even the arising lamp clearing away the dark, according to, the way they're answering their opponent at least. The arising lamp doesn't clear away the dark because it doesn't make contact with the dark. And that kind of makes sense. You have to think, well, what does that mean? To make contact with the dark? To clear away the dark, you have to make contact with it. Well, I think you do. I mean, like if you're cleaning a dish, when you're doing the washing up, you have to make contact with the dirt on the dish to clear it away. You have to make contact with the grease on the dish to clear it away, right? So when you're clearing away the grease on the dish, the grease that you make contact with, it gets cleared away. And the grease that you don't make contact with doesn't get cleared away because you haven't made contact with it. It's still there waiting to be cleared away. So there's something in that. I don't know exactly what, about it making contact. But as he says in verse number 11, or if you say the darkness is cleared away by a lamp that it had no contact with. Yeah. So what if the lamp doesn't have contact with the darkness but still clears away? Well, in that case, you've got the consequence that this lamp set here in this little place will clear away all the darkness in the world. If it can clear away darkness that it doesn't make contact with, then it should be able to clear away all the darkness in the world then. Just like if you clean the grease off one plate, you don't need to make contact with it, then you can clean the grease off all the plates in the world just by cleaning one plate. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? You wouldn't need to buy a washing up machine then. Easy. On number 12, different argument. That's the end of that argument about the tricky argument. This one is a little bit simpler to understand here. Number 12, the lamp, if it illuminates its own and others' entities, then darkness too obscures its own and others' entities, no doubt. So he's just saying that, if the lamp does illuminate its own entities, then the darkness can obscure itself and other things too. I mean, I don't know quite how good an argument that is. Just because light does it, then darkness ought to be able to do it as well, because darkness is the opposite of light. Well, maybe. Does darkness obscure itself? Does darkness obscure other entities? Well, we certainly be allowed, we normally, in a worldly way of thinking, we think that darkness does cover things. When the darkness is in the room, you can't see what you're looking for, your pot or your cloth or your dish or whatever. The darkness, they're covered by darkness. So that's obscured by darkness. So we would say in worldly terms, darkness does cover other entities, but does darkness cover itself? Well, that's kind of not so difficult to understand. He says, well, if darkness covers itself, then you wouldn't be able to see darkness, would you? Because it's covered up by darkness. If it covers up itself, then you wouldn't be able to see darkness. But of course, we can see darkness. If you couldn't see darkness, then we'd see everything all the time. But that's not true, is it? Sometimes there are things we can't see. And why? Because they're covered by dark. But if the dark covered itself up, then it would hide itself. So there wouldn't be any dark. Everything would be light. And that's not how it is. Yeah, so what's going on? And simply, we'd be tempted to say, and you know, okay, well, does the light really illuminate itself? Questionable, but does it illuminate other things? Well, why not? You know. Okay, so now I'm going to look at this this document, Light and Dark, 19th of October. So my thoughts after the last class, you know, because I've studied this text for a bit, and you know, I was difficulty in understanding it, so I did translate Tsongkhapa's commentary on it. Still didn't really feel I'd understood it. You know, we taught it in northern France, and other, you know, I didn't really think I'd understood it there. But now after the class that we had last week, I had another think about this, the lamp and the illumination business, and I feel as if I've got some kind of answer. You know, it's only my idea. It's not like I've been on the telephone to the great masters of Drepung or something, and my old teachers, and asked them. It's only my understanding, but I think it starts to make sense. But it needs a bit of explanation. So even Jia Rinpoche, even Tsongkhapa's not giving all the help you really need. But he's writing a big book, you know, and he's I'm not blaming him for, you know, but he's right. His text on Ocean of Reasoning is excellent, really excellent, and but it's a great work. But it's it really does explain Nagarjuna in the way that I've never seen anybody else do it. You know, the consequentialist view that he puts forward is not just saying Nagarjuna is this real mystifying character who just, you know, refutes everything. You know, he starts to make a bit of sense with Jia Rinpoche's, you know, interpretations. So Jia Rinpoche says, yes, this is a quotation from that bit. If you look in the in the, what is it? I think it's the first endnote from that we read through last week, most of it. So I'm just taking one paragraph out of there, and then my comments follow. So I'm saying, conventionally, we accept that a lamp clears away darkness. Conventionally, you see. So if you look at Buddhapalita, he says, you know, the light doesn't clear away, it doesn't illuminate its own or others' entities. So that's on the ultimate level, according to Tsongkhapa. But conventionally, the lamp does clear away darkness. Conventionally, the lamp illuminates other things. It doesn't illuminate itself, but it does illuminate other things. So it doesn't explain here what Tsongkhapa says about why doesn't the lamp illuminate itself. But I think that's I think the way I would explain that is to say, well, when the lamp is there, there's light shining, isn't there? So if the lamp is lit, we're talking about, when we say lamp, we mean a lit lamp, a fully lit lamp, right? Not just sort of a lamp that you could light if you find the matches and struck the match. But it is lit, you know, it's the lamp here means the lamp that is lit and is burning, you know, to full capacity. So when you've got a lamp then that is burning, and the flame is bright, then there's no darkness to clear away, because all you've got is light. So the lamp then doesn't clear away its own darkness, because there isn't any darkness in the lamp. So I think that's what it's saying, you know, that you know, to say arising makes itself arise is you know, something making itself come into existence by its, you know, just causing itself is ridiculous. And the simile or the comparison with the lamp is just doesn't help at all. The lamp doesn't illuminate itself. You know, if you're talking about lamp, you've got something that's already lit up. It's already a light. It's already glowing. So it won't clear out any darkness of itself, because there is no darkness there in itself. So that's why the lamp doesn't illuminate itself, either on the ultimate level or the conventional level. Can't remember if this comes along a bit later. Anyway, I think it does actually. I made a note about it anyway, sort of. Does it come along later in the note?
Yeah, specify that.
Yeah, it is. It comes in the next paragraph. It comes, yes, okay, not to worry. It does come in the next paragraph, yeah. So I won't say anything more. But we accept the lamp clears away darkness, and it clears away the darkness that's covering other things. So that's Tsongkhapa saying that. Conventionally, see, not ultimately. Buddhapalita and Nagarjuna are saying, oh, well, the lamp doesn't clear away its own or others' entities. They mean on the ultimate level, because they're dealing with guys who are saying to do it, it's got to do it ultimately. You know, if it exists, it's got to inherently exist. So they say, no, it doesn't exist. It means it doesn't inherently exist, you see, because they're talking to people who equate existence and non-existence and inherent existence. So they're not talking on the conventional level, they're talking on the ultimate level. But if you talk on the conventional level, then Tsongkhapa does accept the lamp clears away darkness. Merely conventional usage, you know. So what the difference is in the ultimate and the conventional, that's all very, you know, yes. Well, how do you distinguish the two? Good question. Anyway, if the lamp does clear away darkness, then Tsongkhapa says, in which case, though, the arising lamp and the darkness must indeed meet. Yeah. So that was the observation by Buddhapalita. The light and the dark don't make contact. So, you know, the arising lamp. He said so, but if we're agreeing that it's the arising lamp that clears away the darkness, then the arising lamp indeed must meet the darkness. If you're going to clear the grease off the plate, you've got to make contact with the grease. The soap on your brush has got to make contact with the grease. Yeah, so if the arising lamp's going to shove the darkness out of the way, then it's got to make contact with the darkness. Yeah, so both Tsongkhapa and the opponent are actually accepting this arising lamp that clears away the darkness. But we've had this problem, you know, the arising lamp. What does it mean? The rising sprout is not a sprout, yeah? It arises before it's a sprout. So, you know, we've got to keep thinking. We haven't got the solution yet. However, at the time of the arising lamp, there is no lamp. You see, that's what I just said. See, at the time of the arising sprout, there's no sprout. The sprout arises and then it comes into existence. Very curious. The process of arising occurs and then sprout comes into existence. So, you know, well, you say, well, does sprout perform the function of arising? Well, yes, sprout arises, but then it performs the function of arising at a time when it doesn't exist. So you've got a non-existent performing the function of arising. Haven't you, Anila? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I didn't have the microphone. Non-existent arising, no.
So we've got a non-existence which performs the function of arising.
No.
We've got a common base of being non-existent and performing the function of arising, performing function.
No.
Because, you know, the sprout at the time when it is arising.
Well, the
sprout at the time when it is arising is a common locus of non-existent and performing function, because on the one hand it doesn't exist, on the other hand it performs the function. The sprout at the time of its own arising.
Yeah, it's not arising at the time, it's not existent at the time of its arising, but it cannot be called non-existent.
Sprout follows the sprout at the time of its arising is non-existent.
Sprout at the time of its arising is not existent.
And sprout at the time of its arising performs the function of arising.
Yes. Yeah.
There, that's it. You've got a common something which is both non-existent and performing the function of arising.
But that which is performing the function of arising is sprout, right? Is it or not? And whatever is sprout is necessarily existent.
The sprout is not performing the function of arising, because it doesn't exist when it's arising. So how can it perform the function of arising when it doesn't exist? It's very easy to say, oh, the sprite is performing the function of arising, but it is not performing the function of arising because it doesn't exist when it's arising.
Yeah, it's strange, yeah, but it's so what is performing the function of arising then?
Well, you Madhyamikas have got to answer that question. You Tsongkhapa followers, you see, you think Tsongkhapa's got this great view, but as soon as we inquire into it, collapses. Yeah, so we've had this problem before, and Thomas was giving some good answers, but he's fortunately he's not here tonight.
I think he's joined us.
You're there, Thomas. Where? Hey, we need your help, Thomas. Quick. The subject, the sprout at the time of its arising, follows it doesn't exist, Thomas.
Except.
The subject, the sprout at the time of its arising, follows it. It arises. It's arising.
Except.
So the subject, the sprout at the time of its arising, is performing the function of arising.
Why?
Because it's arising.
No privation.
Oh, no, perfect. So if it's arising, it's not necessarily performing the function of arising.
Except.
So what's it got to do to perform the function of arising apart from arise? You know, if I'm performing the function of, opening the door with my key. All I've got to do is open the door with my key, right? If I'm opening the door with the key, I'm performing the function of opening the door with the key. All right.
Has to exist as well.
Has to exist. Look, at the time of the sprout, when the sprout is arising, at the subject, the sprout at the time when it's arising, is it arising?
Except.
Yeah. So the subject, the sprout at the time when it is arising, follows it is performing the function of arising.
Except.
So the subject, the sprout at the time it's arising, on the one hand, it is performing the function of arising, and on the other hand, it's non-existent.
Except.
Hey!
Why?
So it's able to perform
No.
necessarily a functioning thing.
Except.
Hey!
Why?
All those years spent studying collected topics, it come out with that.
No.
If it's able to perform function, it is necessarily a functioning thing, because if it's able to perform function, because able to perform functions is the definition of functioning.
No privation.
So able to perform function and functioning, it follows they are mutually inclusive.
Except.
Yeah, so if it is able to function, perform a function, it's necessarily a functioning thing.
Except.
If it's able to perform a function, it's not necessarily a functioning thing, because there is something which is able to perform a function and non-existent.
Reason not established.
There is something which is able to perform function and non-existent, because sprout at the time of its own arising is that.
Yeah, reason not established.
You had good answer the last couple of times we talked about this. You were answering it right now. Now you're just you're just sort of sinking in the quicksand, desperate for answers. What do you say, Anila? Sprout at the time. Right. I thought we debated this one in France. We thought we'd sorted it out, but it looks like we've forgotten what the right answers are. Anyway, we
Agree on that one, Gisela.
pardon?
We didn't agree on that one.
We didn't.
No?
I thought we'd sorted it out in a friendly manner.
But wasn't the conclusion that the sprout is non-existent at the time of its causes, but is still an existent? Wasn't this the conclusion?
Yes, that's definitely got to be accepted, I think, that sprout is non-existent at the time of its arising, which is non-existent at the time of its causes. But it is arising at the time of its causes. So it's both non-existent and arising or performing the function of arising. So that's the kind of, there shouldn't be anything which is both non-existent and performing a function. Because the only things that perform function are functioning things, and they all exist. Anyway, this is a similar case, you see. So what is doing the clearing away of the darkness is the arising lamp, according to Tsongkhapa. He accepts that. And the arising lamp is the one that meets the darkness and then pushes it away, you see. So if you we're still on the, we're not going on very fast, are we? So we're still on the second line of this explanation. Anyway, however, at the time with the arising lamp, there is no lamp. So at the time with the arising sprout, there's no sprout. But still we say the arising lamp clears away the darkness. So it's not necessary that it meet the darkness. The lamp doesn't have to meet the darkness. It's the arising lamp that meets the darkness. By the time the full lamp is there, the darkness is gone, you see. So the lamp isn't meeting the darkness, but the arising lamp that, that's just, coming into existence, like just growing from a little tiny beginning little flame up to a big flame, that's the one that's clearing away the darkness, because as the flame expands, then the darkness has to recede. Yeah? So that's how he's explaining it so far. So for those who assert that clearing away the darkness by a lamp is established by way of its own characteristic, so these are the guys who are the opponents. In their case, when the arising lamp and the darkness meet, at that time the lamp would have to exist, but it does not. So this is the flaw which we find in their system. So if you haven't met this kind of criticism before, it's a bit unfamiliar, but we have talked about it with the seed and sprout. If you say there's an arising lamp or an arising sprout, it's like you've got a dependent relationship. You've got the sprout depending on the act of arising. Yeah, the sprout arises. So the arising is like something which brings the lamp into existence. The lamp comes into existence, it arises. So it's kind of dependent on the act of arising. And there's no arising of a lamp or no arising of a sprout without a sprout at the end of it, you see. So the arising itself depends upon, that's the arising of a sprout, because a sprout comes into existence at the end of the process. So you've got this dependent relationship of the act of arising with the object, sprout or lamp. Okay, but as soon as you've got a dependent relationship that's inherently existent, then we said that's where you get into trouble, because if it's inherently existent as a dependent relationship, then each one has to be there all the time. If the sprout inherently depends upon the act of arising, or vice versa, then it's got to depend on the act of arising at all times. So and the arising is depending on the lamp or the sprout. So then the arising, if that inherently depends upon the lamp, then again it has to be like a situation where they're both there at all times, locked in this dependent relationship. And my example was, to remind you, if you're sitting on a chair and then you say you inherently depend upon the chair, or you say the chair inherently supports you, then it will have to support you at all times, forever. So you can never get up from the chair. If the chair inherently supports you by way of its own nature, it supports you. And you're inherently dependent upon the chair by way of your own nature. You're always dependent on this chair. Then. So the chair will follow you around wherever you go. You'll never be able to detach yourself from the chair. So this is the feature of the Madhyamika C. Once you accept dependent relationships, dependent arisings, you have to give up inherent existence. It's no good saying you can have both of them together, which is what those lower schools do. They say that. They say, things have to inherently exist in order to exist. But still they understand dependent relationship of, effect depending on cause. So they want to have both. They want to have inherent existence and dependent arising. And Tsongkhapa, the Nagarjuna says that's not possible. So that's why you have to give up inherent existence. and say nothing's happening on the ultimate level at all. Yeah, so that's their fault, you see. So once they say the arising lamp clears away the darkness, but for them, at the time of the arising lamp, the lamp has to be there. And if the lamp were there, then the darkness would be gone. So even at the time of the rising lamp, there would be no darkness because the lamp's already there. You see, so in their system, where they want to have existence by way of own characteristic, existence by way of inherent ultimate existence, then they can't explain how the lamp clears away the darkness. We can. We say it because we can say the lamp's clearing away the darkness by virtue of the fact that it's the arising lamp that clears away the darkness. And at the rising lamp, the time of the rising lamp, there is no lamp. But since the arising lamp clears away the darkness, then it's okay. This is sort of merely imputed kind of illumination. So, I don't think Tsongkhapa's words on their own are particularly enough to kind of, explain everything for somebody who's just not really used to this type of reasoning. And even if you are, it takes a long time to work out. So my comment's coming next. So I'm saying, JR, that's Tsongkhapa, J. Rinpoche, he modifies Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita's stark claims that the lamp does not illuminate itself or other things. So that's what Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita is saying, but that's on the ultimate level, you see. Just like in the Heart Sutra, we said there's no form, there's no feeling, there's no discrimination, on the ultimate level. But Tsongkhapa's, much more willing to accept, conventional reality. He spends more time establishing conventional reality than do Nagarjuna or Buddhapalita. And I think it's partly to do with the kind of opponents he was dealing with, in his sort of era, were different from the opponents that Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita were trying to knock down. Anyway, we won't go into that. So that's the modification of J. Rinpoche saying, we can have some sort of conventional illumination. Conventionally, the lamp can illuminate. Okay, but what does it illuminate? So first of all, it says the lamp does not illuminate itself, either conventionally or ultimately. The lamp does not illuminate other things ultimately, but does so conventionally. And that's tying in with the conventional worldly view, which is what the consequences like to do when it's suitable, that they go along with the world in worldly things, like whether lamps illuminate or not, or whether whether sort of things perform functions or not on the sort of common worldly level. If they like to agree with the world, because there's no other ultimate or kind of standard of the way things work apart from just how they're accepted in worldly convention. So just like worldly people, then we'll agree that the lamp does illuminate other things conventionally. And in brackets there, you've got the one about darkness. You see, the same with darkness too, by the way. It does not obscure itself conventionally or ultimately, but it does obscure other things, but then it does not obscure them ultimately, but it does so conventionally. So there is, an acceptable parallel between the illumination and the obscuring, the illumination by light and the obscuring by darkness. Okay, so now, as my explanation continues, where the lamp is and where its light reaches, there is no darkness. So you've got the fully bright lamp, and it's maybe only like a weak lamp before we had the days of electricity. So it only reaches so far. So the light doesn't go on forever. It doesn't sort of illuminate the whole house or the whole room or something, but just a circle of light around, around the light. So it doesn't reach out so far. But in the place where it reaches, there is no darkness. So the darkness only occurs where there is no light, where the light runs out, where the light is, absorbed by the, I don't know, what the light, the photons of light are absorbed by the atmosphere or something, blocked by little tiny particles in the air. And so the light only can go so far in an ordinary atmosphere, and then it kind of ceases because it's sort of the energy of the photons gets absorbed by, I don't know, particles in the air or molecules or something. Anyway, so So the lamp, this is what Tsongkhapa is saying, you see. The lamp in the sense of the fully qualified lit lamp does not have contact with the darkness and does not clear it away. Because wherever it is shining, there is no darkness. However it's managed to reach, in all the area where it's reached, there is no darkness. So it's not clearing away darkness because there's no darkness to clear away there. And therefore it does not illuminate other things, since the meaning of illuminating is clearing away darkness. So it's not the lamp itself, it's not the fully lit lamp that clears away the darkness. By the time the fully lit lamp has come into power, then there's no darkness left. So it doesn't illuminate anything. We say conventionally the lamp illuminates darkness, but that's because the arising lamp illuminates the darkness, you see. J.R. explains that it is the arising lamp that clears away the darkness. And that is how we can say the lamp clears away the darkness conventionally. It clears away the darkness as it is coming into existence. You know, just like we say the sprout arises, but it doesn't mean that it's existing when it's arising. Yeah, the sprout arises and then it exists. So this is the arising lamp. So that the lamp, while it's arising, clears away the darkness, and then it comes into existence, you know, at the end of the process of arising. And by that time, the darkness is gone. So that is how we can say that the lamp clears away darkness conventionally. Conventionally, people do talk of a lamp illuminating a place and clearing away the darkness there. J.R. Rinpoche goes along with the conventions of the world here, but it is the arising lamp that does it. At the time of the arising lamp, there is no lamp, though. You see, that's you know, this is really kind of quite complicated. The arising lamp meets the darkness, that clears the darkness away, that pushes the darkness away. But there actually is no lamp at that time because the lamp is still arising. The lamp is still arising. Nevertheless, by virtue of the arising lamp clearing away the darkness, it is correct to say that the lamp clears away the darkness, conventionally speaking. Compare, a sprout arises. It performs the function of arising, even though at the time of its arising, it does not exist. Yes, there's some similarity there. And, you know, this is discussed, you know, and I think it's in endnote number 4, you know, what we're actually talking about here. You know, well, the lamp, the sprout depends on the act of arising. The act of arising depends on the sprout. Therefore, there's a dependent relationship. And if that's inherently existent, then they both must exist simultaneously at all times. So that argument is discussed in another endnote, endnote number 4. So we don't sort of give the complete examination of that. That comes a bit later. But you can see how, if the sprout is not there at the time of its own arising, you know, the farmer points to his field where he's planted his seeds, and then, you know, it's been a dusty few weeks, a dry few weeks, so there's nothing much happening in the field. But then it rains, and there's nice heavy rain. So then the farmer says, "Oh yes, now the sprouts are arising. You see, now the seeds are sprouting. So now the sprouts are arising." But he can't show you any sprouts. You can't say, "Look, these are the sprouts that are arising." He can only imagine the sprouts that are going to come. And in dependence upon, you know, his own, you know, how it appears to his mind, he says, "Oh, the sprouts are arising." It's just his interpretation, see? So that's conventionally posited arising. And remember, if we said the other way of thinking about, you know, is it the sprout arising or the seed decaying? In any one instance, yeah, the seeds have been in the fields, and then there's nice rain, it's nice warm weather, there's nice heavy rain. So what's happening? Are the seeds disintegrating or the sprouts arising? Well, you say both, yeah. But what's really happening from the object's own side? Well, you know, it's whichever you like, but again, it just depends on your interpretation. Is it an act of arising or act of disintegrating? Well, it's both, yeah, but it couldn't be both from its own side. Yeah, so, you know, this is why we're talking about conventionally positive arising instead of, you know, real arising, which you all kind of, you know, grasp at as happening. So, and then just to finish off with this paragraph, so whatever clears away the darkness must make contact with it. And it is the arising lamp that makes contact with the darkness, not the lamp itself. Well, I've explained that. So how do we understand the rising lamp? So this puzzled me for a long time, you see. At the time with the rising lamp, there's no lamp. You know, the time with the rising sprout, there's no sprout. So what is there? What's there? You know, what are we supposed to think of when we sort of try to have a picture of an arising lamp? How do you picture an arising sprout? You know? So the arising lamp then is I now take it. This is after me, after my mature consideration. I now take it that it means a lamp whose flame has just begun and is slowly increasing to full size. Until it reaches its fully lit size, it is arising, and this light is reaching further and further, pushing back the boundary of the darkness. But when it has reached its full lit size, then it becomes a lamp, and the darkness has already gone from wherever its light reaches. So you could compare that, you know, if you're already a lamp and you just come into a room with a lamp, you see. Similar sort of process. So the light gets pushed back in the beginning, but when the lamp is fully established, then everywhere that its light can shine, it is shining. So it's not pushing back the darkness anymore. So it's not clearing dark. So it's not illuminating. According to these guys, illuminating means clearing dark. So this is an explanation then of what I've already tried to explain. The opponent in these verses, 8 to 12, he also states that it is the arising lamp that clears away the darkness. But since the opponent clings to inherent existence, for him, at the time of the arising lamp, the lamp would have to exist. Yeah? If I'm inherently depending on this chair, it's by way of my own nature that very own nature, I depend on this chair, and I always will depend on this chair, and I'll never be separated from it. Because by my own nature, I'm dependent on it. I'm just locked to this chair by my own nature. So I'm always going to depend on it. You never can take it away from me. So it's like that. Once it's inherently dependent relationship, and even at the time of the lamp's own arising, the lamp would have to exist. And, just think of it, can the lamp arise by its own power if it's not even there? If you say, well, everything must exist by way of its own power. So how can the lamp, arise by way of its own power when it doesn't even exist? So think about that one. So that's the fault that these people, Tom Carver sees in the opponent's position. But it doesn't come clear in Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita's commentary, in their verses and Buddhapalita's commentary, does it? He doesn't explain that. Tom Carver can sort of explains it, but even then you have to really think about what he's trying to say. What does it mean by a rising lamp? It doesn't make that clear. But I think it's there. It's the lamp that it's just been lit and it's gradually growing bigger. Just the flames growing bigger. So yeah, that's what's doing the pushing away of the darkness. Anyway, the opponent, for him at the time of the arising lamp, the lamp would have to exist already. Just as the sprout would have to exist at the time of its arising. This key argument is discussed in endnote number 4. For the opponent then, since the lamp would have to exist at the time of the arising lamp, then even the arising lamp could not clear away the dark, because the dark would already have been cleared away if the lamp were already present. So quite a difficult section. While it is clear that grasping at inherent existence creates great problems in explaining the case of the lamp and illumination, yeah, so once you understand, inherently existent dependent relationships, it messes everything up in terms of sequence, cause and effect sequences through time. But then it's still quite a step to make, to conclude, therefore, that the lamp clearing away the darkness is merely, in the perspective of the observer, merely a conventional, merely conventionally existent. So I can't go any further than that at the moment. Lamp and dark, quite a tricky section. But I feel Tom Carver does make sense of it. You know, his explanation is you don't see it anywhere else. People just tell you what Nagarjuna is saying and then leave it at that. But it's not satisfactory, really. For people who really understands what Nagarjuna was saying. Well, Tom Carver does make a coherent system. Okay, so any questions on that?
Do we still maintain that darkness is the mere elimination of light, or the mere absence of light, or space without light, or something which is if it's mere negation, it's permanent. So we would say that that location without light, and it would be an affirming negation in this case. Or?
So Jimpa's asking what you mean by darkness. So he thinks it might be the mere absence of light. So that would be some kind of non-affirming negative, non-affirming negation. So what's the affirming negation? A place without light or something?
Yes.
Well, you said a place without light. So this still involves negation, but you've got some sort of positive phenomena coming up there, see? A place without light, is that darkness? Well, there is a secondary color. Dark is the secondary color, isn't it? There's 8 secondary colors: light and dark, sunlight and shadow. You know, there's secondary colors. So maybe we should think of dark as a functioning thing. So not a kind of a negative at all. This stuff. Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, though, does it? To ordinary experience, to think of dark as a functioning thing. I mean, unless
Light.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at the whole entirety of reality, but the idea that darkness is a functioning thing, that's a bit of a strange one, isn't it?
You think it's more like the sheer absence, do you?
Yeah. I mean, I used to think cold was the sheer absence of warmth, but I'm not sure anymore. But darkness feels different than cold, being the absence of heat, for example. Because there's nothing there.
Well, again, in the collected topics, they are both tangible objects. So they are both functioning things. Cold is a tangible object, and heat is a tangible object. You know, it's just a quality of fire. So
what category does it fall into? I mean, is darkness atomically established?
well, it would have to be if it's a color, yeah. Yeah, it'd have to be, you know, material matter. It would have to be matter, yeah. Form.
So we're saying darkness has atoms then?
Well, you know, it's like blue. So something can be colored blue, something can be colored dark. It's the color that something can take, isn't it? So when you have something that's colored blue, like a blue box, yeah, then the blue, which is the actual color of the outside, there would be atoms of blue, yeah.
But what? So that's okay. I can see that a bit like, you know, you put a glass, I don't know, a glass ball on top of a cloth and it takes the color of the cloth. You could say that about all these different atoms that are in different shapes or something. But I don't understand what darkness would be based on. So you'd have to say that, you know, consider subject in my room. If I turn the light off, suddenly my TV, my desk, my lamp, my banana, my tanker, suddenly all get dark color atoms just in one go. I mean, it just seems a bit out there.
I think your banana would still be yellow.
Well, it can't be because there's no color atoms anymore emitting or being decayed, or there's nothing.
Yellow color atoms don't go away.
Sorry?
The yellow color atoms don't go away. The darkness just obscures them.
No, that would suggest the darkness that comes in the room. I mean, what we're talking about then, the air atoms, they turn dark, shrouding the tanker. Do you know what I mean? It's all a bit strange, that kind of idea.
What happens if I paint my room black and then turn the light on?
No, Tim, no.
Might be thinking I'm a goth. The dark.
Yeah,
Gothic.
because color is like depends on the eye of the observer, doesn't it?
If my walls are black, I can still turn the light on. They're still going to be dark.
Yeah, that's cheating.
Yeah, if you ask me to explain it, I think of light as dark as being the absence of light, really.
Yeah, that was what the physicists would presumably would think of it, as dark as an absence of light.
You'd imagine, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
That would explain why our pupils get bigger at night time to try and capture more light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can see it with your eyes. You don't need it appears to your eyes, so it has to have an appearance factor. It has to have the power to appear. So then in the standard collected topics idea, if it appears to your eye consciousness, then it's got to be a functioning thing, hasn't it? Maybe the prasangas, the consequences have a bit more leeway than that, but in our collected topics examination, it's an appearance to eye consciousness. So we should have a basis of being a functioning thing.
If we compare with silence and sound, and in this case, silence would be the absence of sound. So we can hear silence, or does it appear to the ear consciousness? Yeah, in one sense, yeah.
Well, if there is no sound, you recognize it with your ears, don't you? You don't need a reason to prove it's but silence isn't heard by your consciousness, is it? That would be ridiculous. The sound of silence.
Would that make emptiness a functioning thing as well then?
Why?
But it's also a mere absence in the same an absence of inherent existence, in the same way that darkness would be an absence of light and silence would be an absence of sound.
Well, if I was giving answer from this Sutra school point of view, I would try to make out that darkness isn't a mere absence. It is color, so it is a material phenomenon.
You could say, are you equating darkness with the color black then, rather than a mere absence of light?
Well, color black, I wouldn't equate them. Darkness covers things up, doesn't it?
I'm not happy with that. To think of darkness covering things, it feels like it's a substance that covers things, where it doesn't really work like that for me. It's just the particles of light come in and illuminate what's there. So you don't really see the darkness. You just enables you to see what's there, rather than some sort of substance that's there obscuring things.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. But then cold is for them is a tangible object. You feel cold.
Yeah.
In absence of heat, it's a tangible object in its own right. But silence is another one. Silence that seems more like just the absence of sound, even with the Buddhist presentation.
But heat, physicists would say that is energy, and the absence of heat completely would give you absolute zero. So anything above that, there has to be some energy there.
So yeah, for you then, cold is just the absence of heat, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the degrees of absence, presumably. If it was totally absent, then you've got absolute zero. And it's just the gradations of heat and how much you've got.
Yeah, I mean, we feel cold at, when it's well over freezing, it's not even freezing point of water, but we feel cold, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bit different that though, isn't it? Because it can stop you. You can actually become frozen. You know what I mean? Yeah, it can actually be slowed down and freeze and grind to a halt because of ice. Whereas darkness, you know, it doesn't quite do things. You know what I mean?
Doesn't quite kill you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, you know, that's my feeling.
Yeah, so if you just turn the light off, it gets dark. But where does darkness come from? If it is darkness is the functioning thing, it's just going to spring out of nowhere and be there.
Yeah.
Is it there all the time? But it's hidden by the light or something. Driven back by the light. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that one really. Same with the arising sprout. We figured the answer to that one out, you know. But we've forgotten it. Maybe it's written down in the last paragraph. There's the last in some of the endnotes. It deals with some of these arguments. Maybe the last endnote number 5. Yeah, so there's plenty more to discuss about that. We haven't really got to that point yet, really. So we don't have to sort of have the final answer to that debate yet. So it's just something to think about. And also the nature of darkness. I mean, I was looking a little bit on the internet today about, you know, what the Western idea of light was. But then it started to say, is darkness the mere absence of light and so on? But I just gave up because, you know, if you start looking at the internet, you just go on forever, can't you? So I didn't follow that one up about what darkness is. Yeah, anyway, so if we just finish off a couple of verses, we've got a bit of time left, haven't we? Yeah. So that's it for darkness, light and darkness, really. I mean, my little effort there, I think, is I kind of sort of made a bit of progress myself. But yeah, it was kind of studying these things for a bit, really. And it's challenging to sort of just get the picture straight away. But anyway, you can look at that little effort and see what you make of it. And then, as I said, after that argument has gone on for verses 8, 9, 10, 11, then there's a different argument about why the lamp doesn't illuminate its own and others' entities, and that's through the comparison with darkness. So we've just mentioned that one. The lamp, if it illuminates its own and others' entities, then darkness too obscures its own and others' entities, no doubt. So that's verse number 12. So maybe we should just read this, the commentary underneath there then. Here a lamp stands as the antithesis of darkness. If also a lamp illuminates its own and others' entities, no doubt it follows that darkness too obscures its own and others' entities. Yet darkness does not obscure its own and others' entities. For it did so obscure, then just as with others, the darkness should not be observed at all. So just as darkness covers the pot or covers the cloth so you can't see them, then if darkness covers itself, then you shouldn't be able to see darkness either. Then there would be the non-observation of darkness, the perpetual observation of things. Yet things are not perpetually observed, therefore darkness does not obscure its own and others' entities. That being so, a lamp, the antithesis of darkness, does not illuminate its own and others' entities either. So what was said above, that like a lamp, arising gives rise to its own and others' entities, is not correct. So well, we can still say that darkness does obscure other entities. It doesn't obscure itself. If it obscured itself, then you wouldn't be able to see it. But we can see darkness. But does darkness obscure other things? Well, yes, we can say it does, but conventionally, not ultimately. Conventionally, just like the light. Conventionally, we can say illuminates darkness, because the arising lamp illuminates darkness. You know, that kind of the unfamiliar argument that's coming through there. Anyway, so neither the light nor darkness can do anything to themselves. The light doesn't illuminate itself, and the darkness doesn't obscure itself, either on the conventional or the ultimate level. On the conventional level, the light illuminates other things, and the darkness obscures other things. Ultimately, neither of those two is possible. So now, going back to what we were talking about in the first place, which is arising, you see. So arising gives rise to its own and other's entities. So that's the thing we're really trying to prove is not correct. The lamp was just like a digression, just like an examination of somebody's example. So moreover, if arising gave rise to itself, something arisen would give rise to it, or something not arisen. Neither is tenable. How so? Yeah, so this is the familiar Nagarjuna approach. You know, he splits up the problem. If you say rising gives rise to itself, is it arisen arising that gives rise to itself, or unarisen arising that gives rise to itself? So neither of those two is possible. Does arisen arising give rise to itself, or unarisen arising give rise to itself? If it's the first possibility, unarisen, or is that the second one? I don't know. So anyway, the first one in the text, number 13ab, being unarisen, how would this arising then produce itself? If the arising is unarisen, yeah, unarisen arising, could that give rise to itself? Unarisen arising being non-existent, how on earth would it produce itself? If it hasn't arisen yet, how can it produce itself? Only something that has arisen can produce something else. So unarisen arising can't produce anything because it's not arisen, it's still non-existent. Or else, you know, whoever could produce the entity of an unarisen non-existent, if a non-existent could also produce its non-existent self, then even a hare's horn could produce itself. It does not do so. Therefore, unarisen arising does not produce itself. So here, if it is thought that arisen arising produces itself, regarding that it says, but if arisen it produce, what is produced once more. If arising has arisen, you know, then arisen arising would have to produce itself. But why talk this nonsense? How will there be arising once more, what has already arisen? Thus, at least, arising, and the arisen does not produce itself. So unarisen arising can't produce arising, and arisen arising cannot produce arising. So it's nonsense to talk about something, you know, producing itself, something making itself arise. Okay, so the opponent then is saying that arising, you know, he's trying to twist things like, you know, to get out of the Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita critique, you know. So at one point he said arising, then it produces itself and it produces the other object. Yeah, remember that we had the pot with the three characteristics on, you know, arising, lasting, ceasing. So in this view, you know, this arising, which is a characteristic of the pot, is something which brings the pot into existence. Yeah. So the arising is a fact which brings the pot into existence. The arising makes the pot arise. So if somebody says, oh, well, what makes this arising arise then? If that arising is required to make the pot arise, is there another arising required to make that arising arise? And so forth, you know. So the opponent says, no, the arising, it makes itself arise and it makes the pot arise. So this fact of arising on pot has got two functions. It makes itself arise and it makes the pot arise. So this example we've given here about the light is to destroy the idea that the pot, that the arising can make itself arise. Yeah. Well, that's one of its functions. And then now can you see, so Buddhapalitas are going to say, well, an arising doesn't give rise to anything else either. Arising can't make itself arise, and arising can't make anything else arise either. Just like we have the lamp can't illuminate itself, and it cannot illuminate any other things either. So arising is just like that. The arising can't make itself arise, and now he's going to say arising doesn't give rise to anything else either, because there is no arising. So that's what he's going to prove now. So we'll just follow this through to see where we're going to get to. So just introduce the next argument that's going to come up. So what was said above, that arising gives rise to something other apart from itself, is also untenable, you see. So there's no arising that makes anything else arise. And not just arising, their special variety of cause, but any cause. Buddhapalita is in effect arguing that any cause, no cause, can give rise to something else, if you accept inherent existence, of course. Thus, if arising, or any other cause for that matter, gives rise to something other, that other to be caused to arise by arising, or by whatever cause it is either arisen, or else arising gives rise to something that is unarisen, or that is arising. So that last bit of the sentence is a bit unclear. I know the Sanskrit was very difficult. So what it means is, you can just look on at the bottom here, page note 32. Sanskrit here is uncertain. Does arising, or any other cause for that matter, gives rise to something that is arisen, that is unarisen, or that is arising? So that's the next discussion that is going to go on for a few verses to the end of verse 21. So that's just to make that clear, ladies and gentlemen, that you may not be getting the picture there, but so you have a cause. In this case, we're talking about the cause arising, which is this special cause of these guys that are the opponents at this time. But any cause, if it's a seed making a sprout arise, or the potter making the pot arise, doesn't matter. It's all the same. Yeah. Does arising then, or any other cause for that matter, does it give rise to something that's already arisen? So then that one's refuted, and that's fairly easy to refute. Yeah, it won't give rise to something that's already arisen, because if it's already arisen, it doesn't need to arise. Okay, will the cause give rise to something that is unarisen? Now here, by unarisen, we mean that has not yet begun arising. So again, that needs a bit of explanation. It takes a bit of a while to work out what they're saying. The unarisen. The cause does not give rise to the unarisen, but what it means is it doesn't give rise to something which has not yet begun arising. Still in the future, the arising process hasn't begun. Or does the cause give rise to something that is arising? So that seems more plausible, not the past or the future, but the present. The cause gives rise to something that is arising now. But all those three, Nagarjuna says, all of them are kind of fatally impossible for you guys to accept inherent existence. So again, he's breaking down this question of arising, you see, into three. Does it arise in the past? Does it arise in the future? Or does it arise in the present? None of them are possible, so there is no arising. But that's the next section of the text, which is a very good section. But just remember, arisen there means that which has not yet begun to arise. So is there any such a thing? Geshe-la, is there any such thing? Something that has not yet begun to arise? What do you say, Thomas? Is there anything that's not yet begun to arise?
It's something which has already arisen. No, it hasn't been. It has arisen.
There's something which has arisen, like my supper. It arose and I ate it, and it's arisen and finished, gone. Well, this watch, that's arisen. That's arisen. The watch has arisen, so that doesn't need to arise. But then there's something which is arising. Maybe you could posit something which is arising, like, the sprout or something on your dish, on your windowsill, you're making bean sprouts. The sprouts are arising now, But is there something which is not yet arisen in the sense it has not yet begun to arise? Can you posit an example of that?
No.
Well, what about, say, you're planning to go out for tomorrow somewhere, and you can't afford to go to a restaurant. You know, you're only a volunteer, and Geshe Nam is very careful with the money. So it doesn't let his students have much. So you have to take sandwiches. You see, you can't go into a restaurant for your lunchtime snack. You have to force to take sandwiches because Geshe Nam is very careful with the money. So you say, well, as soon as this lesson is finished, I'm going to make some sandwiches, you see. So the sandwich that you're going to make for your lunch tomorrow, have you started to make it? No. So that's something which is not yet arisen. So is that which is not yet arisen, is that arising?
Except.
Well, you can say that, but, you know, what are you going to make the sandwich out of? Well, you're going to use bread, yeah? So the bread's already in the fridge. So the bread's already arisen. And the bread's been arising from beginningless time. Hasn't it?
Yeah, except.
Yeah. The bread came from the flour, and the flour came from the wheat, and the wheat that grew this year came from the seeds of the wheat that grew last year. And the seeds of the wheat that grew last year came from the seeds of the wheat that grew the year before. So there's nothing which is not in the process of arising. All these future things, like your sandwiches for tomorrow lunch, they're already arising now. Did you but know it? Is your lunch arising now, Anila? Tomorrow's lunch, is it arising?
No, it's not arising.
What about your lunch, Hanele? Is it arising? Your lunch tomorrow, is it arising? Hanele, can you hear me?
I don't know, yes and no.
Are you planning to have lunch tomorrow, probably? You probably will have lunch tomorrow, won't you? Will you be asleep? You're doing a night shift or something. So is your lunch tomorrow, is it arising?
If I don't die, yeah.
Yes, well, that could always happen, unfortunately. Yeah, well, we have to stop there. So it's anyway, he splits it into three. So something's already arisen, something that's not yet begun to arise, if there is such a thing, and the thing which is arising, and none of them arise, he says. So that's just sort of like try to get a preview of what's going to come next time we get back to the text. Okay, then we'll have to stop there.
Thank you very much.
Bit of a tricky bit.
Thanks very much.
We did our best.
That's the last one until next year.
Yes, maybe mid-January or something. We get onto this. Get back to Nalanda. Start teaching around about that time. So thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Geshe.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Well,
Thank you.
Making me think.
Thanks to Jason, because he did all the work of making the Zoom appointments, and so he's done a heck of a lot of work too, which I could never have done.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
thank you,
Thanks,
Jason.
Jason.
Happy to do it.
Okay, then I'll leave it
See you
there.
next time. Bye.